as we progress, things are going to get little complex, because the moment JavaScript comes into picture is everything goes into the programming side rather than the designing point of view. We have a very less scope of a design at this point because the box based design, the coloring and everything, and now we probably limit ourselves and play around with the program side, objects, how we handle and putting the object oriented programming concept behind it, various things we are going to work on. Okay, our requirement now, we have to prevent, for example, this is a form. I hope I have written the form having, it submits the data to some URL. It does through post. I already told you the post and get, it's slightly two different variants of sending the data to server using HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol. It defined by the networking terminologies. How the post and get works, probably at this point may not be important, but at least we know the difference between them. The get appends the data, the payloads in the URL itself, whereas the post adds the data on the header so that it is invisible in the URL, so it is considered slightly secure. But I'll give you a little detailed information about how the HTTP post and get works and how we can handle the browser responses in the next, or maybe in a couple of sessions ahead. But at this point, the form submits using the post. Okay, so we have a couple of input text fields. Text field in the sense the input having attribute type defined as text, and of course radio button, checkboxes and drop down we have. So we have to make sure the user fills the form properly, then he clicks save. If the user keeps some elements or maybe some input text field empty, we should not allow the form to be submitted. So that's our task in fact. But at this point it is submitting, it is going to the, because that particular page what I pointed, it doesn't even validate anything. So we have to make sure it validates. At least in this case, none of the fields should be empty. Maybe first 3 input fields should not be empty, and maybe these things, gender at least, for example, or either one choice has to be selected. For other checkboxes, even one or no choice also allowed. So maybe we have to make sure all the 3 is filled. The proper way of identifying the input text field, the desired value, using the regular expression, we call it in short regex. But regular expression itself will take you to another concept, like it, I may need a little time to explain because it involves on the patterns and how you validate it. So I don't want to disturb at this point, but at least I'll try to make in this example these values read by JavaScript and analyze, okay, whether the field is empty or not. Then we will allow it. First point, we have to stop the event propagation when the form is empty. So how I can do it? So that's the task now. Before that, I would like to give one more way of handling the event. For example, the button. When button gets clicked, I'm just calling a function called click handle. So this works as we expect. But there's one more way. Instead of adding this kind of function, I'm just going to comment it for a while. I can attach an event listener as soon as the DOM is fully loaded. So for example, let me first get the object of the button. See the keyword var, variable. Object declaration starts at this point. Looks like a global variable because it is immediately there in the script block. So I'm going to get the document get element by ID. Which object I am trying to get, for example, which document object model I am trying to access. In this case, since I defined through ID, I need to make sure there is ID exists. I have given an ID name btn. So at this point, your HTML element can be accessed using this object btn, because in the document it searches for an ID, and once the ID is found, this particular object will have a value, and it is nothing but the same element, and it has all the instance, all the property of that particular element or DOM. Sorry, we are talking on the JavaScript side. It is a document. Okay, so I'm going to attach a event listener. May not be suggestion, most of the time doesn't come, but anyway, add event listener, which event you'd like to listen. In fact, that guidance is already there. I'm trying to listen the click event. Whatever on is available, you know that there are various events available. See, there are a list of events. What you can do, just skip the on, and for example, on click, I'm just going to put click. Just listen, any click happens to this DOM. If click happens, inform me through this function. Function has an event as an argument. Follow the sequence how I put the next argument. The next argument itself a function. The function has an event parameter. So anytime any event, for example, in this case, the click event happens on this DOM, it will immediately execute this function with the information about the event. So this event will have all the information about that particular DOM, what it was clicked, what kind of a text it is having, what is the parent of this tag, everything it will have. This object will contain every information about it. In fact, I want to know what it is that. So there could be various event listener can be added. Once the DOM is loaded, we can get the object of that particular DOM by defining document get element by ID, defining its ID, and I can attach the event listener like add event listener with the various events. In this case, click events. So I just click, and there are various other events. For example, let me see what is the other event. Maybe on key up, assuming it may not be applicable for a button, maybe it will be applicable for an input text. Assume the user keep typing and releases the keyboard, I can immediately listen it event. So there are whatever events available, you can simply omit the on and put the event name inside. Anytime that event is performed, it will immediately inform through the function. There is alternate ways. If you find a little difficult, I'm finding it a little difficult to define in this way, you may do this way as well. Means I created a function. The function, whatever it is going to return, will be captured in an object, and that object can be given as an argument here. If you feel that particular line of code is quite redundant, you can do in this way. Remember, a JavaScript object, of course, a primitive data type such as string is accepted. 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 These are all the objects by default, primitive types. These are all the objects already there. I don't need to explicitly tell it is a string or something like that. Depending on the value you assign, the object will automatically realize, okay, it is a string, it is an integer, or it is a Boolean type, whatever. These are all the primitive types. We have no problem with that. These are all the JavaScript specific object declarations. This object is nothing but an instance of the after executing a function. So a function can also be defined in this way. A function, whatever it returns, can be captured in this way. Otherwise, of course, the object, all it needs an object, I can directly declare that function over there itself. So whatever way you feel comfortable, you may do it. Going ahead, we'll be doing number of different strategies. I will be keep shifting a different usage to make sure you make utilize every other ways. I'm not going to stick one idea or something else. Sometime I'll be using inline function declaration, sometime I will make it as object, depending, because as we think whatever way we feel comfortable we'll keep using. But for other example, subsequent example, I'll be keep using a different ways. If you see some little difficulty, try with a different approach, see if it works. Remember, throughout this exercise, I want you to use a Chrome or Firefox. I already told you certain, for example, the click may work, the on key up or something like that, the key up may not work in different browser. So I'm not really sure about the old or maybe the outdated version browser will support everything. Until we start using jQuery, we have to make sure we follow an up-to-date browser, Chrome, Firefox, or if you download Internet Explorer in the latest one, yes, absolutely, these things will work. And of course, you still have W3 Schools, the website, which contains a comprehensive information about it, and it also gives us various exception details like what all the browser will support this functionality. You may still use them. I'll go back. Maybe in some other round I'll use the different type function. The event by default will be handed over in this way. Remember, follow in the same way how I did, because if you remember, I'll write one more time. I expect another argument in case, so there should be a second argument. What I made sure I completed this block. So this function block is completed. I mean this add event listener, 2 arguments needed. I finished, and then I write the function. So I make sure it is everything is nested inside. Instead, sometime what will happen, I've been noticing this thing. For example, the user is typing. Let me try from the beginning. User will be worrying about which one is nesting or something going wrong, because I don't know really, because it is already complaining me, and it will be very difficult for me to identify the parentheses or whatever it is. So follow a strategy always. If you are writing a function which expects some argument, make sure you complete it first, then put the arguments whatever needed inside. That will make sure everything is nested properly. Of course, your what you call NetBeans will guide you throughout. If you are using some other editor, or maybe you are using plain text, a notepad, the suggestion may not be available. Okay, now we attached an event listener for that particular button. We have to verify whether it is working or not. So working way console log. We're just going to see whether the button is clicked, whether it is invoking or not. We have to identify. But here, the placement of the script tag is also very important. Remember, this line is executed the moment the DOMs are ready. So the ideal placement would be the end of the document. The script block should be at the end, because it is going to search the ID called btn. So while it searches, the DOM should be available. If you keep this block on the top, that particular DOM may not be visible to it, because the script block will be executed first, and then only the rest of the DOMs will load. So it is ideal to keep the script block, in this example, it's at the end. So let me run it. Just refresh. I'm going to go to the JavaScript console. I hope this is the click. Okay, if you notice that, okay, click handle, see, it's giving me an error because actually I commented the code, but anyway, if you notice that button clicked, that particular event of the console is printing. So let me remove the event handler which has already been there. That's the reason it is complaining me. So anytime when the button gets clicked, I see the console output. Now if you see this button only having an ID, but any action performed on this button, the JavaScript keep listening to it, because we have attached an event listener to that particular DOM alone. Anything happens to that. In this case, it is going to notify, a click event happens, it will notify. Okay. Now this is fine. For a button it is fine, assuming the user is going to submit the form. So I need to detect when the form is getting submitted. There is the same way. I've already defined ID for my form. The form is having an action call on submit. So this can be called while the form is the user press the submit button. This particular form, we can throw a function or we can attach an event listener whenever the form is getting submitted. So I'm going to attach an event listener for my form so that I can identify the form is being submitted or not. Any name, just let me give it just one single form I have. So I attach, my DOM is ready, need to attach an event listener now. So in this case, I need to omit on, just put submit and attach the function which will hand over the event. Okay, so whenever the form is going to be submitted, it is going to call this function. So let me execute. I'm going to click on this. Sorry, actually it went into the next page before detecting the output. Let me prevent it. So preventing is pretty easy. The event is already, you have an object called event. There is a function called event prevent default. If we call this function, the default action would be aborted. Nothing but the default action taking the user to the second screen or somewhere. It will be aborted there itself. So let me try on this point. Notice that it did not submit, but I still end up getting the console output. So the form submission prevented, stopped. So using that DOM event, I can stop the propagation, the next bubble. You know that it just propagates to the next level of action. One point of time, I'm stopping that particular event, not to proceed further. So that's a usefulness of this particular object. So whenever the form gets submitted, we can block it. So in this case, what we can do, we can put a various if conditions trying to see whether the fields are empty or not. Every field is filled and with a valid information entered, then we can allow the form to be submitted. For any other condition does not meet, we can immediately trigger the prevent default so that the form will not get submitted. I hope we are already on track on that. But anyway, let me add a couple of other events need to verify, because let me see, input text field. So there is a input text field exists. So is there any way I can detect its value? So here, whenever the user types something and releases the keyboard having an up and down sequence, I hope. So down mean you are typing something. I mean, as you hit the keyboard, you will be pressing it down. Once you release, your typing is over. So I'm going to detect the user, whatever, whether he is typing or not. So there is an event called on key up is there. So that event I'm going to listen. So I already have an ID defined for that. So let me define one more object. Typos possible, make sure you type it properly. I need to omit the on, so just key up is enough, and of course the function. Every time I'm using a different one purposefully, because it's your choice, whatever the new object. Because just there is going to be an object representation is going to come, so we don't have to worry about it. Now I have to display that what is I'm typing. So for the previous example, only I listen the action But in this case, not only I'm listening the action, I also need to read what is being typed over there. So generic console typing is not going to work. What I'm typing, I need to display in the console. Actually, we can make use of this event. In fact, I want to know what is this object. We can very well test it. What is that object and what kind of value it has? I'm just going to see what is EV. Hopefully, the key ID is same. First name I have attached. Okay. Sorry. One letter I typed immediately detected. But if you notice this particular object, it is nothing but the object value of that event. It is a very complex object. It has a lot of information about that particular DOM. It not only contains the text being typed, it has a lot of, it's a complex object. It will have entire information about the particular DOM. In this, I'm going to search for a keyword called object called target, and in that, see, if you see that hide every information, who is the parent of that object, every other information is also present. The document is a quite heavyweight object. Or in other programming concept, right, document represent the context of the entire view. It has the every information about your view. In this case, your entire HTML. In this case, I'm going to search for a object called target. Am I inside the target? Sorry, it's a very bigger one. Okay, I'm going to search. I'm inside the target object. So I'm just expanding the target object. I'm searching for one called value. This is the value. This object contains, if you notice what I just typed, the value is present over there. So I'm going to slightly modify this code. Event inside an object called target, inside an object called value is actually the one what you just typed inside. You know how I'm calling the object representation? By putting the dot, an object, and its inner object can be referred by putting a dot, and if it has one more object residing inside, put a dot and trying to retrieve it. Of course, we are slightly getting into a JavaScript object notation. In fact, this is how the way the JavaScript handles the object. So now I found an event. The event is fired. Event is fired by a key up event which is attached to an input text field. The moment that key up happens, it handovers the event to the function. In the function, I am seeing what all the object it contains. In that object, the target seems to be having the instance of that particular input text field. In that, there is an object called value. This is the one I would like to get. So let me see as I start typing. Okay, 2 minutes. So if you notice that as I start typing, once I let me clear it, key down happens. Now I release the key value would be present. So we attached a event listener for the input text field by default as if, in the way that, like, as soon as the DOM is entirely loaded, and we do have the event listener taking control. The next subsequent example, I'm going to attach the event listener for radio buttons, checkboxes, and various other elements. Now we have attached event listener for one of element, or maybe two elements. One is being form, another one is first name. First name being in text input, another one being a form. Now we know a way to attach a event listener and identify an action performed on that particular DOM. This list of events can be found for any respective DOM by if you put control space, so anything start with on, all the events. So all you need to just omit the on and type the name of the event inside here and capture the event whatever is being performed on the DOM using a function with the event argument in this case. We have seen click, submit and key up event. Let's see any other events we could detect. Then we move on to JavaScript object type because the time to see them what kind of object the JavaScript has. So text input we have tested. Maybe we can test a radio button. Okay, radio being having ID male female. Okay, let's detect that. In this case, the event is going to be change because the change in focus of your radio button. So whenever the change happens, remember the change may be true or false. Sometime the button would have been clicked, sometime the button might have not been clicked or the focus would have changed to some other radio button. But for both the reason it is going to trigger. So the change event, because I have a option here on change. So this is the one. You can either call it through a normal JavaScript function, define it here, or you can register a event listener for this radio button. So let us see what is the value being clicked. And I also need to know whether it is selected or not, whether it is set to true or false, something. And that also I may need to identify. So I don't know what exactly value it's going to be, but let me see what is the value. And also I would like to read the entire event target so that I can pick the required value from that object. So I'm just going to read the console output of the ev.target. So the event is going to have a target object. Inside that object we may have whether the true or false state and of course the value of the particular input field, in this case a radio button. So let us see. Okay, this is okay, default error. So let me click on this one. Okay, so the target being the entire input field, I'm getting it. Okay, the value, okay, fine, I can get the value in this way. But before that I want to see the event totally what it is giving me. Okay, quite bigger complex object. Yes. That. Who's that? Okay, the checked state. If you notice the checked true false. So this is the one I would like to see. So let me put a if condition. Target check. If it is true, you may say it is selected or unchecked. Check. Otherwise, if you're trying to denote the value of it, you can very well get this way. So if you have suspicion over what kind of object the event is giving us, put the console output, see the what kind of object it is giving, identify the object. In my recommendation, most of the object information will be available under event.target, the target event which is getting the action. And you can just go through that, what are all the value you need to pick up, use it and use for your further references. So like that, click on key up, change, and various events you can fire on. And all the events can be registered as soon as the entire DOM is loaded, and you can have them displayed in the console output, or maybe validate the form or create a complex object and send it to the server. Whatever way you want to do, you can do that. Further clarity, a JavaScript object is denoted by the keyword var and the name of the object and the value of the object. Unlike other high-level programming language, there is no object type declaration followed by. It is object type is automatically understood from the assignment it takes. So when object type of a string, automatically JavaScript object assign it as a string. So depending on the value it takes, the object type will be automatically assigned. So we don't need to worry about whether it's a string, integer or anything. Whatever the value it takes, automatically it is going to assign. Few more complex object I would like to tell you, but maybe for the further example I may again write it, but for the introduction purpose I like to tell most commonly used objects. Of course, the primitive objects will be using quite often, like integers or booleans, strings. One of the object we will be again using, say, items. If I denote a square box or square bracket, it is an array. So it's a JavaScript array. If I define in the curly brace this way, it is JavaScript object. So this is the type you will be quite often you will be using. Again, the convention follows. As long as I could differentiate and know the use of the object, I will have a different name, string, integer, boolean. But I don't have a clarity on that object, I'll simply say object. So this is, I have no idea what kind of a data it is. So that's the reason I made it as just object. The square bracket, make sure there is an object, but it is unsure of what kind of object is going to be repeated inside. But it is an array which is going to consist more than one object. This is the initialization, like empty object and empty array. I mean empty array. See, remember the naming convention, I gave it as a plural items. Okay, I'm trying to say it's an array. So make sure you use the similar naming convention. If you are trying to use or create an array, make sure a plural information, so that as a programmer you may have a track of your usage, object usage. And if you know single thing, you may say it as a single item. So naming convention also will be very important. Going ahead, best practice, I am going to make it as a rule itself. If you do not give a valid name, I am not going to consider that code as a professional one. So make sure you give a slightly valid name according to the context of your application. I mean, so if your application is going to be for shopping list items, of course the item's name makes sense. So similar naming convention you can use. Okay. Let me start with the object, then I'll go back to the array, because at least one value we needed. Say item. Item has various attributes. For example, item name. You may be wondering what I did. In fact, I just tried to initialize my object. An empty object created at this point, and I'm trying to give a clarity to that object, defining its inner properties. Like an object, it may have an item name, item quantity, item cost. So now this item object has three inner objects inside: item name, item quantity, item cost. So the whole bunch of the object contains the three different object representation, being a string or maybe an integer is also there. Of course another string is also present. You can create a complex object in this way according to the whatever property you wish to do. So JavaScript does not have a setter getter way of doing that. You may do the same thing if you write the setter getter methods to achieve the task. In this case I have straight away did it. So it could be anything you define after that and give the value. I want to see how it is looking like. So let me put a console log. Hopefully it is going to run immediately as I start or refresh the code. Okay, I think that error we don't do about it. We see that the output which I just use, I'm trying to output the object called item. It is printing item name, item quantity, item cost. This composite information of a specific item. I can extend the property of this item in this way, simply denoting a dot, whatever the object type, object name you want to use, keep using it and create a complex type. You may use quite often. For example, if I ask you to create a list item, list view where you enter the object, for example, shopping item name, quantity, price, and click submit, immediately it gets saved. So the list item will not only contain the information about the object, it will also contain the information about how many quantity you are trying to buy, how many or how much you paid for it. So all the information can also be tied up and denoted as a single object. So this is how we could represent an object in JavaScript way. So a JavaScript object representation, which is quite popular, we call them as JSON or JavaScript object notation. In fact, this is how it's been, represented. It's quite easy to pack and create your own data type and define and its characteristics through the way however you want. So now we have created an object. If you want, add the object inside the array. Array push will make sure the item is added at the end of one array. So the object is added at the end of an array. Of course, the array is empty, so this would be the very first item which gets added. Like that, I can go ahead and create multiple objects and keep adding them. Remember, the second time I did not initialize, declare it because it is already initialized. Right? I empty it and again define with the new one. So the new object, the object flushed, maybe the previously used object flushed, and a new declaration starts being given and new values being assigned, and it's again attached with the item array. Let us see how the items array looks like. Sorry, console. I'm trying to print the array instead of the object, so I'll just comment this line. Okay, now see that output. It is combination of two objects with a square bracket. If we closely watch it. So the array contains two objects. Each object has a different item name, item price, and item quantity. So I bundled an object inside an array. So I can create any kind of complex array or object and represent in JavaScript any way I want. And remember, the event target, what you got, it's a complex object, what you already saw, that event. So any kind of complex object, for example, an object can also contain another object. Type is a keyword, so item. It can also contain another object or another array. It could be in any format. It could you can format and go ahead and use it. But at this point, I'll just try to keep it minimalistic because we'll try to use them in various applications. We'll end up seeing what kind of a combination of an object and array could be created. Then we represent them into a view and see how we can manipulate it, and which will also take effect in the JavaScript side or the view side. Of course, I'm trying to come to a conclusion that model view controller would be needed at one point of time as things get quite complex. But at least at this point, you should understand a JavaScript object can be represented in this way. An object, if you do not have an idea about what kind of object it is, initialize with the curly brace and define it inner properties followed by dot. It could be any whatever you want. And if you really want to enter them or insert inside an array, make sure you use the array push and insert the object. And of course, it's an indexed array. JavaScript by default, JavaScript arrays are indexed array. You can manipulate it, index it, and you can do a lot of things with that. For example, you can insert an item or at the end or at the beginning, or you can delete an item or replace the item. You can do a lot of things. JavaScript array is an indexed one. So it's like, in other high level language, programming language, the way you use the arrays, the same way you can also use it in JavaScript. So the next, probably the other example, I'm going to create a fully qualified uh, shopping list project, offline project, and it is going to have a list view and the submit button. Once the item is or the form is entered, it will create a JavaScript object and populate a JavaScript array. Any items of JavaScript array could be represented as a list view, and we can create a small application, self-contained application using these two object types. That's the next example I'm going to work on, but just an introduction about the JavaScript object. A JavaScript array has various methods to insert, update or delete, index it, replace it. There are various things are there, array, splice, and other functions also there, but I'll be introducing them in the next maybe subsequent example what we are going to work on. Today's task, you have to make sure you work with the events. May not be very important on the object side, because it's just an introduction. This part I just want to give you an introduction because we are going to use it in the next level. But at least make sure you work with the get element by ID and listen various events, and also try to keep the script block somewhere else instead of this place. Keep it somewhere, see what kind of errors are coming, because I wanted you to find out what would be the better place to keep the script block. In my understanding, it is the end, because I am searching for a DOM. That DOM should be loaded. After that only it is advisable to search. So that's why I kept it at the end. But also you try playing with the various places, what kind of error you are getting, and identify them. Also try to put the output the event or console output of that particular events, and see what kind of complex object type it has. Okay, one more thing. In this case, I would like to output the second item quantity. So how I can write it? So items index start with the 0, so naturally the second item in 1, and in that I'm trying to print the item quantity. So it will print this value, because this is the second item quantity. So the first instance is getting the index of an object, identify the particular object by defining its index. Naturally the second is nothing but the index 1, and you have instance of that object, and then get the value. That's what the dot representation came in the previous example as well. So I can get the information about the object by representing a dot, and then I can retrieve the object. If you feel this part is redundant, what you can create an object, items, whatever way you prefer. So in this way also you can do. So an array is created. Array is having two values or two objects inside. I'm getting the second object, so giving the index 1, and I got the object, and I want to print the item quantity alone. All I need to just put the dot and retrieve the value. So if it is a complex, for example in this case item type, if I have a complex data type, keep putting the dot and until you reach the specific value what you try to get. Remember, if it is object you can keep dot, but assuming there is an array also exists, you'll be in trouble. So understand and see the object how it is presented, and if it is read somewhere you may need to iterate it over to get the desired object. So it's up to you, but at this point it's just going to be an introduction for you. Maybe if you have a time you can do that, but today's requirement, attaching the events and trying to detect them. And few other ways also there. I already gave you the first way. In fact what we are seeing is alternate ways. By directly defining the events is what I gave. I hope you remember. So that could be also a suitable way. So you can give a a function name directly here. Otherwise, you may register using on add event listener. There are a number of ways. Whatever way you feel comfortable, you may use in your production purpose. But since it is a learning stage, I wish you try all the other alternate ways and encounter the issue. In fact, I'm pretty interested to see when unexpected results are coming, and that will put you into a research mode and trying to identify what exactly going on. So trying to see how these things work. I'll give the entire afternoon for your hands-on side.